I'm Allie. I came out after 20 years of marriage and I have 3 kids.
I'm Melissa and I have 2 kids and I came out at 37 after an 11-year marriage.
This podcast is about coming out later and the struggles and victories that come with it.
When coming out feels like the end of the world, but it's really just the beginning.
This is the Lesbian Chronicles.
Hey guys, before we jump into this next episode, wanted to give you a quick heads up of a trigger warning on 2 topics. There's mention of sexual assault and suicide. So if either of those topics feel a little uncomfortable for you, maybe skip this episode, but they are briefly mentioned.
Yes, it's minor, but it's in there. All right, enjoy.
But great interview otherwise.
Yes, it is a great interview. Enjoy. Welcome to the Lesbian Chronicles.
Hello.
Do you have a new backdrop?
I do. I updated. I put some pictures and stuff because I had a picture of like Guinness, like an old Guinness advertisement. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't even drink Guinness.
No, it's giving college vibes. Yeah, I love your Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I've got Pulp Fiction. Yep. I got The Weeknd. There's a Taylor Swift. There's like Van Gogh Nintendo print. So
really cool. What's really, you know how we do everything at the same time.
Did you just redecorate?
I do have I didn't redecorate, but I moved offices. So I'm, we're same day, yeah.
So weird. We need to go see like a Intuitive or something and see what this means.
Right.
So,
well, we have a cool guest here today.
We do. I have followed Jodi's story on Facebook for a while. I don't even know how we're connected because it's funny when I messaged you, I was like, maybe she listens to the podcast, but you don't. So if you want to just kind of take the lead and because I don't want to like give away tidbits of your story or whatever. So if you just kind of want to dive in and share what's been going on in your life for the past few years.
And then know that I'm an interrupter. When I have questions, I love to time out and be like, wait a minute, what? Okay, so go ahead.
No, that's fine because there might be some pieces missing, I don't know. So I wasn't like super, super late in life, but late enough. So I came out whenever I was 29, right before I turned 30. I was married for 7 years, but with him for 10 years. I have 3 children, one of which that I had I graduated high school, having him, and then had my 2 youngest with my ex-husband. And I came out towards the end of the year, and it was tough. I had always had the thoughts and the feelings, growing up, but I grew up in a very large family on my dad's side and everyone's still married. So my parents are still married. My aunts and uncles are still married. And, so I grew up seeing how life, I guess, was expected to be. And having a child young, I felt like I needed to have that life where I had a husband and bought a house and, raise a family and things like that. And I remember it was a few months prior to me coming out that I was at a Halloween party and there, with a bunch of friends and people that we knew. And I just remember like us being on the dance floor dancing, and I was dancing with this one girl, and she was a very attractive person, things like that. And I was just like, what are these feelings? Like, why don't I feel these with like somebody that I've been with for a decade?
Right.
So it was like super intriguing and kind of like rewinding a little bit, around that same time. So I was, I guess we'll trigger warnings possibly within these conversations and stories with my story. I was sexually assaulted when I was 14 years old, by a friend's father. And it was one of those things, like it was taken care of as far as like the legalities of it. But it was never talked about within the home. My parents really didn't know how to handle that or what to do or say. And so it was just kind of swept under the rug. So for, all of those years, it was nothing that I ever worked through. So I started therapy, and within therapy and talking about things, that's when I started talking about like my feelings towards men and even the person that I was married to, and just realizing like my first son and his dad was my best friend. The man I was married to was my best friend, but it was never more than that. Like, I was one of those people who was like, I could probably go the rest of my life and not have sex and be okay. I'm not a sexual person. After coming out and like exploring that finally, I came to realize that I am in fact a very sexual person, just wasn't doing it with the right people.
Right.
And so working through all of that at the same time of like dealing with something that I dealt with as a child, coming out, I was more scared of coming out to my parents than I was the person I was married to. Had to tell my kids was really scary. My oldest son was probably the most difficult, but it ended up being absolutely okay. I want to say when I came out, it was around the same time that like JoJo Siwa came out.
Oh yeah.
And my daughter was like a JoJo Siwa fan. And we were just hanging out one day, and her little best friend were talking about how JoJo Siwa likes girls. And I was like, do you guys know anyone else that likes girls? And my daughter looked at me, she was like, yeah, you. And I'm like, oh,
wait.
How do you know?
Exactly.
Oh my God. JoJo Siwa bridging the gap.
Yeah,
you know?
she really is.
Yeah. So JoJo Siwa helped my coming out process with my daughter.
That's hilarious.
Yes. So as far as telling my ex-husband, we were actually at a casino for my 30th birthday. And I was just sitting there playing a slot machine, and he was talking about like how much he loves me and all this other stuff. And I just looked at him and I was like, I think I'm gay.
Oh boy. Oh my gosh. What came up for you in that moment? Like, why right then?
I guess just like hearing him say that and like me feeling what I'm feeling internally just got to the point where I was like, I can't reciprocate that back, you know? And for the most part, I mean, me and him, we had a great life, like materialistically, like outside looking in, like we created a great life together, but there was a lot of unhappiness, especially on my end. And so at the end of the day, like he deserves somebody that can give him and love him the way that he deserves. So that was kind of the situation there where I just had to draw that line. And of course, like going into that came a lot of doubt and like, am I making the right decision? Am I like, is this just a phase? Am I just like feeling some type of way because, you know, being a young mom and not having the identity for myself.
Right.
You know, when you go to job interviews and they're like, tell me about yourself. Like that was one of my hardest questions because all I would tell you is that I'm a mom and I'm a wife.
Yeah.
But like, that's not who I am.
How old were you when you had your first baby? Right after high school? So like 18.
I literally got pregnant with him the weekend that I turned 18 and told my parents I was moving out.
Wow.
You know, because the grass is greener on the other side.
Course,
you know, we got life figured out.
But was it like
I know everything.
wonder,
I'm 18.
Right. I always wonder whether that creates a situation where you become more independent quickly, or almost like you lean on people. Like sometimes Melissa and I will talk about like sometimes we want to be independent, but other times we kind of want to be taken care of. Like I've been doing this long enough. Like what did it create in you, Jodi? Like were you an independent woman, or were you kind of like someone fucking help me?
Yeah, so at that time, my parents they're great parents. And they taught me and my sister growing up, like how to be independent and work hard and stuff like that. So like my parents, I never had a hand me out in life.
Yeah.
Not saying that my parents aren't there to help, but they let me fall before they reached that handout to me.
Right.
And so at that time, at being 18 and becoming a mom, like I had to grow up and I had to be strong and I had to figure it out.
Did you move in with the guy?
Yeah, so we lived together and stuff like that. So it was a very toxic relationship. It was abusive and it took a lot of work to where we are today. So it was not a good relationship. And sometimes my son asked me, you know, because we split up a little after one, he always asked me like what life would be like with him and if me and his dad had stayed together. And I was like, it probably would have been horrible.
Yeah. Fast forward.
Today,
Yeah.
he is one of my best friends. He helps with my 2 youngest kids who aren't his.
Oh, wow.
He's been a great father, just all around a good person. It didn't start that way. We had a lot of work to go through.
You were children, babies.
Yeah, we really were. You know, we weren't meant to be together, you know, but we were definitely meant to raise a kid together because, I mean, our first trip to Disney, I was still with my husband at the time. He had a long-time girlfriend, and we all went to Disney together. I went to Europe back in June of the 2023, and it was my entire family, and he came because it was Colton's, my son's. It was his first trip, you know, out of the country. So his dad came with us. So we have a really great relationship. And so as I've gotten older and the coming out and this and that, because I've always been somebody that takes care of people. My ex-husband was a recovering drug addict. And so whenever we met, he was trying to figure out his life and how to live a life in sobriety. You know, so while I was working, paying the bills, he was getting paid like minimum wage, babysitting guys at like, you know, the outpatient treatment places. And just recently, like, which I'll get into that, I just recently got divorced again from my ex-wife. And whenever I had met her, it was told like how she didn't have a family life and didn't have this. And I have an amazing community here where I live. And so I was like, just wait until you come here. Like, I'll introduce you to family. Like, you'll see
you're going to be just enveloped in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always been someone that takes care of people. And I think I've just gotten to the point now where it's like, I do want someone to like help me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm tired of being the one that takes care of other people.
Of course.
But it's also like releasing that independency would be like the hardest thing for me.
Right.
Moving
that
forward.
Right.
Yeah.
So then was the first husband, Colton's dad, was he sweet about you coming out?
So him and I were actually never married.
Never married.
But
okay.
yes. At first it was like a little bit shocking and like weird to him, but now it's just normal.
Right.
He's just like, whatever. He just calls me his competition at this point, which he's in a relationship now and happy, but you know, I become a good wing woman
that's funny.
at times, you know, especially if they're not my type.
Right.
Nice.
Which when I came out, I thought I would be super attracted to like someone like me, a femme, you know, but then I'm like, no, it hasn't been my type.
Yeah, we
at
talk
all.
about that. It does morph, doesn't it? It changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not even that I was be against it, but I'm starting to realize like I have a type for sure.
Right. Well, talk about like the process of, so the you're telling him at the casino, and then how does that then, how do you get from that point to where you were?
Things absolutely hit the fan, at that moment. And then whenever we came home, it was super awkward, but then he had reached out to, a close friend of ours that was a gay man who kind of explained to him, like, if this is what she feels, like, you can't take that away from her. You either have to like let her explore and figure herself out, or you don't, and you guys go your separate ways, like whatever that looks like. And so at first it kind of turned into, well, maybe we can like put something on that will like help, and or, you know, if you need to go out and explore that, but come home to me, like you can do that. So I kind of like took that comment and ran with it. And it probably wasn't like the best thing to do. But so I explored, and I explored with somebody that I worked with that was a lesbian. And I had told him prior, like, if I were to explore, I'm not going to come home and tell you, because I feel like that would be weird.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I'm just going to do it and see.
Mm-hmm.
He found out, and then it turned into like I committed adultery and you know,
Oh my God.
stuff.
Flip the script, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So it was pretty hectic. And so once he found out about that, that was actually February 16th of 2020. And that is also my upcoming date for my attempt on my life.
Oh.
So So February 16th of 2020 was actually the first time I also told my parents. I called my mom and told her what I had been doing, that he found out. He was telling me I needed to get out of the house, all this stuff. And
your mom had no idea.
Yeah.
So this is like, she's like hearing this for the first time.
Or at least I didn't think they didn't have an idea. But I recently found out that like my dad supposedly always thought it since I was in middle school. And I was like, why couldn't you have told me in middle school? We could have saved us.
Come on, Dad.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, shortly after I got off the phone with my mom that day, it just kind of went dark for me, which I've always struggled with mental health and stuff like that. But that was like my first serious like attempt, to the point to where I was on FaceTime with one of my dear friends, and just my body language and the way I was acting, she knew that I was looking for something, to follow through with what I was feeling. And she just hung up the phone on me and made some phone calls. I locked the front door. I locked my bedroom door. I locked the bathroom door. And
yeah.
And the next thing you know, shortly before the police and the ambulance arrives, one of my friends comes barging through doors and things like that. So I was taken to the hospital, spent a little bit of time in there. They did a phone call with my parents, and they agreed to release me to go home with my parents as long as they felt like it was a safe place for me to be. So I stayed with them for a little bit.
And were they being loving and like sweet?
Yeah, they were. So my dad is a very quiet man, and my mom is one of my best friends. We have a great relationship. I tell her everything except for that.
Yeah.
It's just something that I always just kind of kept to myself. But at the hospital, they were talking to my friends, and that's whenever my dad had made the comment, like, I don't know why she would do this. Like, I thought she was since she was in middle school, and my mom was hoping that my feelings towards wanting to take my life wasn't because of me coming out, because they didn't care, that they loved me regardless. And so coming out to my family was easy. They were all loving and accepting, and my sister was the only one that was not necessarily not accepting, but she was just like, I'm not ready to entertain it yet. So as far as like talking about it and hearing about it, she was okay with. But as far as any introduction to anybody in my life, she kind of wanted to take her time on that, which I respected. It took me 29 years to come out, so I can't expect people to just
jump in with you,
be okay with that up front. But my motto with coming out too with people in my life is, if you loved me before you knew who I was physically and sexually attracted to, like, that part doesn't change who I am.
Right.
So if you don't love me because of who I love, then you never loved me.
Right. It's so true.
Anyways.
Yeah.
And so if anyone wanted to remove their self from my life, like, I kind of came to terms with being okay with that.
Yeah, very much. It's like a good filter to get rid of the BS and just be left with the good people.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I kind of went through, I never dated during my divorce process. I would date around, but I never like was in a solid relationship. Like, oh, this is my girlfriend, I'm their girlfriend. I wanted to wait until my divorce process with my ex-husband was done, stuff like that. But I also didn't want to just be with like one girl and be like, yeah, I'm a lesbian, I know this for sure. Like, I wanted to just explore the feelings with women in like meeting women that were in my same situation, as far as being married, having kids, living this heterosexual life for a majority of their life, and then coming out. So hearing people's stories and like making those connections was super important to me, and I really enjoyed that. And then I was like, dating women is hard.
Yeah, to say the least.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Especially finding anyone. I mean, that was a big fear for me, was coming out late, having 3 children. Because there's so many lesbians that don't have kids and they're out traveling, exploring the world. And it's like, I can't do that.
No, relatable.
Be at home.
Right.
Be a mom. So I just wasn't looking for anything. And then I had met my ex-wife on the good old TikTok.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
And the conversation started off really good. Like, we connected on a lot of things that we've been through in life, and neither one of us were looking for anything, but obviously one thing led to another. And
was she in
lived
your
in
town?
Georgia.
Okay, that's what she wasn't in your
she
town.
lived in Georgia. I'm in
Okay.
Tennessee. I'm just like 30 minutes west of Nashville.
Okay.
And she would drive down here all the time and see me. Military. She worked for the police. Things like that. And so she moved down here and she proposed to me on her birthday back in 2022. And we started planning a wedding, but she wanted to get married before the wedding. I was supposed to have my wedding day this year in September. But we got married legally in July of 2022.
How long were you dating before you got engaged?
We started talking in May of 2021.
Okay.
She moved here in November of 21.
Okay.
And then we got engaged in March, married in July.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Quick timeline.
Yes. And I wasn't really ready to get married. But I love this person. Like, you know, I was ready to start a life with this person. And there was a lot of pushing as well towards it, you know, between her pushing and then talking to my friends, and my friends being like, hey, like, if you love her, like, why does it matter to wait? Like, just do it now and then have the wedding. And
yeah.
So a lot of pushing, and it was good. But then, like, behaviors on both ends started changing. I was working a lot. I was a general manager for a restaurant and bar. And I was working like 90 hours plus a week.
Wow.
And taking care of the majority of bills and things like that. And obviously still trying to raise 3 kids and be a good partner and make that time, you know, to be available in that marriage as well. And long story short, in May of 2023, I was at home with COVID, and there was just like been a lot of like bickering back and forth and things like that. And
was she used to the kid? Like, to me, it's like she moved into a new, like, she didn't have kids.
No kids. So a story that I was received from her, and I don't want to share too much on this just because I don't feel like it is my full story to share. But I also know that, so she was married before, back in Georgia, to a woman. This woman had a daughter, and whenever they first met, the ex-wife was adopting a baby who is also her daughter's biological son. And so when me and my ex-wife had met, she had told me about this baby that her and her ex-wife were adopting, and, you know, called him her son and talked about how she rocked him and sang him a lullaby as he passed away and all this stuff. And long story short, me and this ex-wife are now very good friends because I had to reach out to find out who I was dealing with.
Yeah.
I get to the story, but my ex-wife had nothing to do with this baby. They had just started dating. I have like the obituary and the news articles about him because he ended up passing away because he was born from a mother that was doing drugs and things like that. So when I first found that out, that was like my drawing point of like being okay moving on from this marriage. Cause like as a mother and like using a baby and its death as a sympathy or a pity party was like truly disgusting for me.
She's like a liar. I mean, you're a liar. Like there's just like, to me, it's like, I'm done.
Yeah. That takes a different kind of person.
Yeah.
Different. Yeah, very much. And so fast forwarding back to whenever I had COVID, I had the kids that week, and she ended up going out to a bar with a friend and her parents. And it kind of hurt my feelings because like now I'm stuck at home with COVID.
My wife,
you're gone. The kids keep trying to come into the bedroom. I'm like, y'all have to stay away, you know, and she wasn't texting me or calling me while she was gone. And it ended up turning into another huge argument. And we could be here all day if I went like through every single detail. But long story short, the very next day, she told me she was going to go get some dip and coffee, and she never came back home. Yeah. And so that night, me and two of our other friends were sitting outside trying to get her to come talk. She finally came. And then at midnight over the phone, she told me she was ending our marriage.
What was she basing it on?
So she just said that she wasn't happy. So we found out like 2 weeks before this that she was getting deployed. And that like absolutely like shattered me. You know what I mean? Like, how do you deal with that? And there was just different like things that like add up at this point of like where it all stemmed from. But really, she did the same thing to her ex-wife. She woke up one day, wasn't happy, didn't want to be married. Like, when I finally reached out to the ex-wife, I didn't even share the story of what I was dealing with. I was like, hey, you don't know me, but I'm just trying to figure out like who I'm dealing with, like what's going on. And she literally shared my story. That was her story because I mean, how they met, how she left, how they got married, how they got engaged. Like I got married on 4th of July. They celebrated their anniversary on 4th of July. And like, it was just like crazy stuff. And so I realized like the person that I met was not anybody who I knew. As soon as she left, she started like making posts about, and this is why I reached out to the ex-wife. She made like Facebook posts about narcissism and manipulation and controlling, you know, and so people are all sending me this stuff because the second that she left, she deleted every video, picture, post about us. It was like we never even existed for over 2 years. Wow. And that's whenever I reached out to the ex-wife because she had told me the same thing about her ex-wife. Her ex-wife was controlling. Her ex-wife, you know, was abusive in these different ways and stuff like that. And so when she started saying that about me, I'm like, okay, like, I know I'm not that person. But you also said the same stuff about your ex-wife. So was she really that bad?
Yeah.
So long story short, I found out she was cheating with a mutual friend of ours.
Well, I just have to clear this up. Did you say she went out for dip and coffee?
Yeah, I knew I was going to circle back to that.
I got to circle back to that. Are we talking like dip,
Dip, like,
yeah, like tobacco.
Okay, Jodi, I'm going to try really hard not to be too judgmental, but that would have been right there. All I needed. Don't come home.
It's the old dad left to go buy cigarettes, and you know.
Okay, but Jodi, no judgment.
All right,
no
not
judgment.
to make light of your story at all.
You're not the only one to ever tell me that.
Okay. Okay. So she's messing around with this friend who's clearly not a friend. This woman sucks too, horribly.
Yes.
Okay.
So I unfortunately caught a assault charge on the friend, right? The one that was with my wife at the time. I've worked in the bar industry for 13 plus years. Like I said, I was a general manager at one of our local restaurants and bars, and I have been there since the day the gates ever opened at that place. So I was right there at the 4-year mark of when we had opened. And 20 days after my wife at the time left me, I walked into work and I got fired. The owners of this bar absolutely loved my wife. She had shown up the day before I got fired and was talking to one of the owners, and I went in the next day and got the boot. I come to find out that she also tried to get her ex-wife fired from her job. So it's kind of hard to have not felt like she had something to do with it, which after a while, between a small town and everyone telling people different stories, it came back around that she did have a hand in me losing my job.
Oh my God.
So after she had left me, I kind of hit that dark place again. This was the very first person since my ex-husband, obviously, that I brought into my children's life.
Right. And your parents who have been so loving. It's like, I hate that we brought this woman in and they're probably like, they're trying to grasp who this new daughter, you know, all these new things. And then they're like, shit.
Yeah. And so she left without saying a word to them. So I was the one that had to sit and tell them that she was no longer going to be a part of our family. You know, I dealt with my 3-year-old at the time, 4-year-old at the time, asking like if she didn't love them anymore. You know, so that was really hard. My oldest son, who's 15 now, he's kind of like my quiet, very, very good kid, but he's my quiet kid. And even him, like, as a step parent, like, he's made it clear, like, she was his favorite step parent. But I mean, she took everything. Like, she stole money from my 15-year-old. He had a Venmo account attached to her bank, and he would always just give her cash to use his card. And he had just given her like $200, so he's never seen that again. My house that we purchased together has now gone into foreclosure because I was court ordered to move out. She was supposed to be the one that was to take over payments, never paid a penny on it, filed bankruptcy. God. So there was nothing that I could do for her. So before meeting her, like, I had saved, I was living back with my parents for a year, and I was just saving money and just like setting me and my kids up for like a good future, like doing it on my own. And so, like, I had over 30 grand in my bank, and now I have 2 grand in my bank. If that kind of shows you how damaging this marriage was. So yeah, it took a toll on me whenever she left, and to the point to where while she wasn't there, and remind you, like I said, she was an officer. My parents had bought her a safe for the home to keep her weapon in, and she didn't hide the key very good. So I looked for the key and I found the key. And she used my mental health and me making that step against me. But what I realized is as soon as I found the key and knew I had access to it, I made a phone call, and that item was removed from the house. Mm-hmm. To where, 3 years prior, that item would have been in my hands like it was, during my first attempt. So it shows my growth as far as my mental health goes, and acknowledging the fact that, like, I'm not always okay. And so when it came to my first attempt, I realized that the stigma around mental health is real. It's hard to reach out and talk about it. I still remember one time my mom had made a comment to me and was just like, stop thinking that, like, don't talk crazy like that. And my response to her was, imagine living with that crazy in your head. Right. Like, I don't wake up and I'm like, hey, I want to just feel like complete utter shit today.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about leaving people behind, leaving my children behind, hurting people. But sometimes that stuff doesn't matter when you're in those places. And so it got me talking about my mental health. It got me talking about kind of where my mental health began. And I after doing extensive therapy, I was seeing 2 to 3 therapists a week, right after my attempt. So after doing that, that's whenever I started talking about my sexual assault, and then talked about coming out, and talked about my divorce and the treatments and just all this stuff. And I can't tell you the flood of messages that I've received of people appreciating me being open and letting me know their story, and like them feeling like they had somebody that they can turn to when I felt like I didn't have anybody because it wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
And
I
so
think it's so important to do that. We've talked about that, like where you just kind of get vulnerable. It allows other people to do the same thing. It's just,
and it takes the weight off of your shoulders.
It's such
right?
a weight off.
What would you say to people that are like kind of in the boat of coming out new? And like, I'm sure when you met your ex-wife, you were super excited. She seemed like all the things that you wanted.
Yeah.
Like, what do you have
minus
to,
the
like,
dip, she seems perfect.
Right, exactly.
I would say as far as the coming out, I mean, I know everyone's situations are different, especially like how they grew up and raised. I didn't grow up in like a super religious family or anything like that. My grandmother's very religious and she doesn't agree with it, but we still put up with each other. But I also grew up in a family that it wasn't talked about, so it's like, how do you tell your mom that you're gay? Like, how do you tell your dad that? So it just wasn't talked about. So approaching it, like, I never knew. And that's why I was so scared to tell them more than anyone else, because I didn't know how they would respond.
Yeah.
And so I'm very fortunate compared to a lot of people out there, but the community out there is so big. Like, even if your blood family aren't there, like, there's so many people out there that would be there in a heartbeat and support. And I have that huge community. Actually, I always tell people we have a pretty decent sized like gay community here where I live. But I always tell people I feel like my straight friends like support me sometimes more than like our small gay community, which I love our whole gay community, but like the support I've received has been great. I think I've had like one guy tell me that it was his job to make sure I got to heaven, but we won't we won't even entertain that, right?
LOL.
So I've been super blessed about that. But I think really just reaching out and like creating that community within, you know, the LGBTQ plus like is a great start, and having those connections. So whenever you are coming out to your actual family, like you have that support to fall back on.
That's a good point. Like start.
And therapy is a, like, I know therapy, like some people are turned off by therapy, but therapy has saved my life. Therapy will make you look at yourself in ways that isn't easy, but it'll make you grow. Like, can't hate on therapy. I love therapy. Unfortunately, my ex-wife has made me completely broke that I can't afford therapy right now, but we will get back there.
Let me ask you this. What, looking back now, what were though, like, do you look back and think about when we were dating and my friends were saying how great she is? Like, are you like, you know what? No, it wasn't that great. There was this
Or like, where there was like a red flag that you just didn't identify at the time or overlooked or.
Yeah, so as far as red flags, I learned a recent red flag, and I'm just like, that was a red flag, because she's already done to the new girl what she did to me, and she's already on her like third relationship in the past. I mean, our final divorce was this past October, so it hasn't been that long. So she's already on her third one, and did the same treatments and stuff. And there was something that she did with the new girl that she did with me. But my biggest thing was every time I would ask, now a lot of people loved her. A lot of people do not like her anymore, because even though like I went through the worst of it and I had the most taken from me, since I was married and actually like had a whole life with this person, she also lied and deceived a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, so I have to understand, like, I wasn't the only one that like had to realize like what she is as a person.
You weren't the only victim.
Yeah. And for me, I would say my biggest red flag is my best friend of 14 plus years completely removed herself from my life because she's seen that I was being controlled, and she's seen the behaviors coming from her, and I would defend it all the time. Like, oh, like she's just been through a lot in life. Like, you know, I hope she gets back into therapy and works on her. You know, I just always defended it and completely looked past it. And so I think my big thing now is like, if I have boundaries, I can't allow you to cross them.
Yeah. Right.
You know, because it's not just me involved, you know, especially if you're getting into a relationship, because we have children and things like that. So, and that's really hard. Like, because could I have stayed married to my ex-husband probably forever? Probably, but I would have not been happy, you know. So bringing other people into their life is a big thing for me.
Right.
They have big hearts, and so they'll love pretty much anyone that I bring.
Absolutely. That's probably the biggest thing that I've learned along the way too, is like your kids will love people hard because they don't have that life experience to like have a barrier there, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like super important to protect them through this.
Yeah,
definitely.
For sure.
Jodi, what are you looking for or not looking for now?
So I had actually met someone in the middle of my divorce process, and great person. And I don't know how she kind of stood by my side while I like went through everything. But I actually recently just broke things off with her. Because even though I absolutely despise and discuss it with the person I'm married to, I'm still mourning my marriage.
Yeah, of course.
Not necessarily her as a person, but like I was dedicated. I was in love, whether it was with lies or not, you know, like, and so I'm just trying to get to the place of like focusing on myself and getting to a good place and really figuring out like, what is it that I want? What is it that I won't accept? Finding someone that isn't so willingly ready to just give up. Like, this dating in this society at the moment is tough. But growing up with a family has stayed married for years and years and years, like I want that. Like I want to have that love. I mean, I think my mom and dad have been together since my mom was like 16. I mean, I'll be 35 this year. So at this point, it's like, I won't have a love like that, but I would like to.
There's still time.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
People are just willing to give up too fast and think that it should become easy or perfect, and we'll never find that. And so we'll always have failed relationships if you go in thinking it'll be that way.
That's so true. And you're going to be such a better version, like you said, with growth and the therapy and all the things. You show up different in every relationship. And so, it's going to be different challenges, but likely better, like every time.
Yeah, I've always been a go-getter. I'm working 3 jobs right now, trying to like get myself back on track, and obviously still taking care of the 3 kids and just doing what I need to do. But I mean, there's been times where I doubted coming out, like, was this the right thing? But at the end of the day, like, I also know that I've been happiest being true to myself for once in my life.
Where in Tennessee are you? I'm just curious. Like if we.
Yeah, so I'm in Dixon, which is about 40 minutes away from Nashville.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We have a super awesome community. Back in 2021 was our first Pride event that we ever had in our town. Our town is like very good old boys.
Okay.
And so actually one of my job that I was general managing at was one of our big Pride events. And so the following year was this phenomenal turnout. And then last year we had like our first like Pride like festival, which was small compared to like, like a Pride event like out in Nashville and stuff. But the turnout was really good. The people that showed up was good. We had drag show, so it's growing, and there's a strong community of people that are willing to take the hit of, people's opinions and hate and things like that. But it's really nice to be a part of that and have those friendships and
You're
things
so
like
right
that.
too about the community, because it's like if you have that, you have it all.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah,
you're good.
Totally.
So.
Jodi, thank you so much for sharing the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously that's just kind of my story, but hopefully, and anyone is more than welcome to follow along. I don't share every day, but I'm very open about that every day is not okay, and just getting through that and owning it and just doing what we need to do to have good days, no matter what you're.
How can people follow you, like on TikTok?
So I mostly share my stuff on Facebook.
Okay.
Which is where Melissa actually has been following me. And even like she said in the beginning, I have no idea like how that connection ever happened, but
but here we are. So
how do people, I don't have Facebook, but how do people find people on Facebook? Have they just type in your name, or is it
okay if we like link you in the show notes?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
We'll do that
for sure.
Okay. Cool.
So
thank you.
Well, yeah, we really appreciate
though, and meeting other people that came out later on and have kids and doing the thing. I got you guys on Spotify, so I've been like listening to it since Melissa reached out to me. Got the kids in the background. I'm like, shh, I can't hear.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jodi.
Well, thank you, Jodi. I appreciate it.
Good to meet you guys.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Want to support the Lesbian Chronicles podcast? Rate us and write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
We love listener feedback. If you'd like to share your story, email us at melissaandallie@gmail.com. That's Melissa, MELISA, and Allie, ALLI, @gmail.com. Or follow us on Instagram at Lesbian Chronicles.